He walked into my hospital holding her hand, his mistress, glowing, cradling their newborn. He looked at me with that smug smile that once made me weak. Everyone expected me to break, to cry, but I just smiled. Because the man who came to flaunt his betrayal had forgotten one small detail: I own this hospital. And by the time he left, it wasn't just his pride that was shattered, it was his future. The scent of disinfectant lingered in the air, sharp and familiar, as monitors beeped rhythmically in the background. My name, Drive, Amelia Hart, gleamed in gold on the glass door of my office. I had built this empire from nothing but broken dreams and determination. Every inch of St. Haven's Hospital bore a piece of my soul, my sleepless nights, my sacrifices, my resilience. But that morning, for the first time in years, my pulse faltered when I saw a name appear in the patient registry: Lily Carter, maternity wing, accompanied by Ethan Carter. My hands trembled for a moment before I steadied them on the desk. Ethan, my ex-husband, the man I once believed I couldn't live without. The same man who shattered my heart, left me bleeding with nothing but a signature on divorce papers and a mocking smile. I thought time had buried the pain, but seeing his name, it was like reopening an old wound I'd convinced myself had healed. Dr. Hart, my secretary whispered, hesitating at the door. Mr. Carter has arrived. He requested to see the hospital director personally. Of course, he did. Ethan always liked making an entrance. I took a deep breath, smoothed my lab coat, and forced a smile. Show him to maternity room 504. I'll stop by shortly. As I walked through the corridors, nurses' whispers followed me like shadows. They tried to be discreet, but the story of my failed marriage was hospital legend by now. I didn't blame them. Betrayal has a way of turning ordinary love stories into gossip that never dies. When I reached the maternity wing, I saw him through the glass partition. He looked older, still handsome, still composed, but there was something new in his eyes. Pride, satisfaction, and by his side stood Lily, glowing in her pastel gown, cradling a tiny baby girl wrapped in pink. She was beautiful, innocent, unaware of the web of betrayal she had been born into. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Watching him place a tender kiss on her forehead felt like watching a replay of everything I'd lost. Once upon a time, he had kissed me like that. Once upon a time, we had talked about having a daughter too. I turned to leave before he noticed me, but fate, cruel as ever, had other plans. Dr. Hart, the nurse called out, her voice cutting through the hum of the ward. Mrs. Carter would like to meet the hospital director. The irony nearly made me laugh. Slowly, I turned back, adjusted my stethoscope, and stepped into the room. Amelia, Ethan said, his tone dripping with smug surprise. Well, this is unexpected. You're still working here. I thought you'd have moved on by now. I smiled coolly. You could say that. Except I didn't just stay here, I built this place. You're standing in my hospital. His confident smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. Lily's eyes widened in polite shock. Oh, we didn't realize. It's fine, I interrupted, my voice calm, measured. Congratulations on your baby. She's beautiful. Lily blushed, clutching the child closer. Thank you. Her name's Grace. Grace. A name that stung, because once, that's what I had prayed for, grace to forgive him, grace to move on. I forced a nod. A lovely name. I started to leave, but Ethan couldn't resist twisting the knife a little deeper. You know, Amelia, he said casually, maybe if you hadn't been so busy running hospitals, we could have had this too. I froze for just a moment, my heart tightening, but only for a moment. Then I turned slowly, meeting his gaze with quiet fire. Maybe if you'd valued loyalty over temptation, you'd still be standing next to me instead of being a guest in my building. The color drained slightly from his face, but his pride was stubborn. Still the same sharp tongue, he muttered. I smiled faintly. Still the same fragile ego. The nurse shifted awkwardly beside us, pretending to review the baby's chart. The air grew thick with unspoken history, with everything we'd once been and everything we'd become. Then his phone rang. He stepped aside to answer it, frowning as he listened. His jaw clenched, and I knew instantly that something was wrong. When he hung up, his face had lost all its confidence. Lily reached out, concern written across her features. Ethan, what's wrong? He didn't answer immediately. Finally, he muttered, the investors, they pulled out. The board rejected the funding. Everything's falling apart. I said nothing, only offered a soft, professional smile. I'm sure you'll find a way. He looked at me, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but before he could say anything else, a nurse entered to conduct postnatal checks. I took that as my cue to leave. Walking down the hall, I felt the rush of blood in my veins, not satisfaction, but power. Quiet, dignified power, because I already knew the truth he didn't. The lead investor in Carter Biotech, his company, had been a holding group funded by my foundation. He had just discovered what it feels like to lose control, exactly as I once had when he walked away. Back in my office, I sat at my desk, staring at the city skyline through the glass. My phone buzzed, a message from my financial advisor: the acquisition is complete. You now hold 82% of Carter Biotech. I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. It wasn't about revenge, it was about reclaiming what was mine, the dignity, the power, the peace he had once stolen. Yet, as the night deepened and the hospital lights dimmed, I couldn't shake the image of that little baby. Grace. She didn't deserve to carry the shadow of her father's mistakes. I promised myself that whatever happened, I'd keep my justice clean. When the clock struck midnight, I walked through the quiet corridors of my hospital. Each step echoed softly, a reminder of how far I'd come from the woman who once cried herself to sleep over a man who thought he was irreplaceable. I paused outside the nursery window and saw Grace sleeping peacefully. Ethan stood nearby, shoulders hunched, staring down at her. There was no arrogance now, just a flicker of uncertainty, maybe even regret. He hadn't seen me, and I didn't interrupt, because I knew the lesson life was already teaching him: you don't humiliate a woman who learned to build empires from heartbreak. You don't walk into her world thinking she's still the girl you broke. I turned and walked away, the soft hum of machines fading behind me. The past had ended right there, in that hospital corridor. And as I closed the door to my office, I whispered to myself with quiet satisfaction: he came to flaunt his new life, but he forgot who owned his fate. By morning, the world would begin to shift around Ethan Carter. And for the first time in years, I slept peacefully, because I wasn't the broken wife anymore. I was the woman who rebuilt herself so completely, even her betrayer didn't recognize the empire she now ruled. He came back to my hospital, desperate, disheveled, and uninvited. The same man who once flaunted his mistress and newborn in my halls now begged for mercy. But mercy is something you can't buy once you've sold your soul for pride. And in that moment, he realized, he hadn't just lost me, he'd lost everything that ever made him powerful. A week had passed since Ethan Carter strutted through my hospital with arrogance gleaming in his eyes. But now, the sparkle was gone. Rumors spread quickly through the medical staff, whispers of financial ruin, collapsing partnerships, and legal troubles. I stayed silent, letting the world do its work. Some call it karma, I call it consequence. That morning, I was reviewing a new proposal for medical outreach programs when my assistant burst into the office. "Dr. Hart," she said cautiously, "there's someone insisting to see you. He says it's urgent." I didn't even have to ask who. The tremor in her voice said it all. "Send him in," I replied. The door swung open, and there he was. Ethan Carter, once polished, immaculate, and so sure of his place in the world, now looked like a man clawing to stay afloat. His suit was wrinkled, his tie undone, and the arrogance that used to define him had melted into desperation. "Amelia," he said, voice low but edged with anger. "What did you do?" I kept my composure, pretending to study the papers before me. "You'll have to be more specific, Ethan. I've done many things. You know damn well what I mean," he snapped, stepping closer. "My company, Carter Biotech, it's gone. The investors pulled out, the shares tanked overnight, and the new holding company that owns it." He stopped abruptly, realization dawning as his voice dropped to a whisper. "It's you, isn't it?" I leaned back, folding my hands calmly. "I suppose there's no point denying it." "Yes, it's me." He stared at me, disbelief twisting into rage. "You bought my company. You destroyed everything I built." "Destroyed," I said softly, tilting my head. "No, Ethan, I saved it, from you. You ran it like a vanity project. You used my ideas, my contacts, my work, and then you discarded me like a broken instrument when you thought you'd found something prettier to play with." He flinched, his jaw tightening. "You can't." "I can," I interrupted. "And I did. The board approved the acquisition under my foundation's umbrella. Every employee, every patent, every lab now answers to me. I didn't ruin you, Ethan. I simply reclaimed what was always mine. He took a shaky breath, his voice cracking. Amelia, I have a family now, a baby. You can't take everything away from me. The irony of his plea almost made me laugh. Funny, I said, standing, you didn't think about family when you were breaking ours apart. You didn't think about me when you humiliated me in front of colleagues, or when you brought her into our home before the ink on our divorce was dry. You chose this path. I just built mine stronger. He ran a hand through his hair, pacing like a caged man. I didn't come here to fight. I came to ask if you'd consider giving me a chance. A role, anything. I can't lose everything, Amelia. Please. There it was, the sound I'd once waited years to hear, please. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like closure. I studied him quietly before replying. There's a position available in our subsidiary research lab. Junior consultant. Modest pay. No authority, no decision-making power. You'd be working under drive. Lily Carter. His head snapped up, eyes wide. You want me to work for her? I smiled faintly. You're married to her, aren't you? Consider it poetic symmetry. Maybe now you'll understand what it's like to stand behind someone else's success. His lips parted, but no words came out. I could see the conflict flicker in his eyes, humiliation and pride wrestling for dominance. For the first time, he wasn't the man in control. I'll think about it, he muttered finally. Do that, I said simply. But remember, Ethan, every choice has its price. He turned to leave, shoulders heavy. And for a moment I saw the man I once loved beneath all that ruin, fragile, human, and lost. But I didn't call out to him. That woman, the one who used to forgive and hope, was gone. When he left, I let out a long breath, sinking into my chair. The office felt colder somehow, quieter. Power brings peace, yes, but not always comfort. There's a strange emptiness in watching someone crumble, even when they deserve it. Later that afternoon, there was a soft knock on my door. I looked up and saw Lily standing there, holding a small envelope. She looked tired but not defeated. Dr. Hart, she began hesitantly, I wanted to thank you. For not humiliating us. For handling things with grace. I said nothing at first, gesturing for her to sit. She didn't. I know you have every reason to hate me, she continued, voice trembling. But I never meant to hurt you. I fell in love with him, and by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. You could have destroyed us completely, but you didn't. Why? I met her gaze, steady and calm. Because revenge doesn't heal pain. It only feeds it. I wanted him to understand loss, not suffer endlessly. What he learns now will stay with him forever, and that's enough. Her eyes glistened. He told me something last night, she whispered. He said, he still loves you. A bitter smile curved my lips. He loves the woman who stood by him while he built his dream. He loves the safety he lost. But he never truly valued me. That's not love, Lily. That's regret. She nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. I'm sorry, she said again before slipping out quietly. I sat there for a long time after she left, staring out the window at the city lights. The sky was turning amber, the world moving on. For the first time in years, I felt light, unburdened. That night, I visited the neonatal ward. The same nurse from before smiled when she saw me. Dr. Hart, little Grace is doing wonderfully. I looked at the baby, sleeping peacefully in her crib, unaware of the storm swirling around her parents. I reached out and brushed her tiny hand with my finger. You'll grow up strong, I murmured softly, not because of them, but in spite of them. As I turned to leave, I caught my reflection in the glass, calm, proud, whole. By the next morning, Ethan had accepted the position. Word spread quickly that he'd been demoted, reduced from a company CEO to a subordinate in a hospital lab. Some called it scandal. I called it balance. Weeks passed. I watched from afar as he adapted, humbler, quieter, stripped of the arrogance that once consumed him. Sometimes, our paths crossed, in meetings, in corridors, and he always lowered his eyes first. But I never gloated. I didn't need to, because my victory wasn't in his downfall, it was in my peace. And as I stood one evening on the hospital terrace, the city lights shimmering like 1,000 quiet affirmations below, I whispered to myself, he came to flaunt his triumph in my world, but forgot that I built this world. He thought he could wound me, but I turned the pain into power. That was the lesson he'd take to his grave. And that was the woman I'd always been, not the broken wife he abandoned, but the architect of his reckoning and the owner of his fate.